Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. David Mitchell and Robert Webb met in 1993. They were college students at Cambridge in the UK. They were doing theater, and when they worked together, they realized it really clicked. So they took to the stage as a double act, Mitchell and Webb. Stage shows turned into TV writing gigs turned into their own sketch TV shows, the Mitchell and Webb Situation, the Mitchell and Webb Sound, the Mitchell and Webb Look. Then in 2003, they starred on a British sitcom called Peep Show, which helped make them international names. Peep Show is sort of like The Odd Couple. There are two roommates, one sloppy, the other uptight. But instead of being shot like a movie or set on a stage in front of a live audience, the camera in the show is mounted on each character's head. Literally. Every shot is a point of view shot. You see what they see. And when you are looking through their eyes, you can also hear their thoughts. Also, unlike The Odd Couple, Peep Show is deeply, deeply dark. There are very few good people, and no character really grows or changes in the show's 9-season run. You can credit that in part to the writing of Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong. Jesse went on to create the HBO show Succession. Anyway, Peep Show's final episode aired about 6 years ago. Mitchell and Webb sort of went their separate ways for a while. Then, recently, they reunited with the sitcom Back. It just started its second season on IFC. Now, in a moment, you'll hear a clip from Back, but first I do want to mention that while this interview is mostly fun joking about fun jokey stuff, it actually concludes much more seriously. I asked Robert Webb about some controversial tweets he posted in 2018 and later deleted. Those tweets were critical of a charity which provides care and support for transgender and gender nonconforming kids. That portion of our conversation has a very different tone and is obviously about some very sensitive issues. We want to make sure that you're not caught off guard. Also, worth mentioning that David Mitchell and Robert Webb were recording their ends of our conversation locally, but they declined to provide us with those audio recordings. We were recording a backup with our video conferencing software, but that backup started about a minute into the conversation, so you will get a little bit of extra intro. Okay, all that having been said, let's turn back to Back, the Mitchell and Webb sitcom. The show follows foster brothers Stephen and Andrew and their long struggle for control over the family pub. In this scene, Stephen, played by Mitchell, has just returned home from his time at a wellness center. He runs into his foster brother, Andrew, played by Webb, at the family pub. Stephen becomes irate when he discovers that Andrew paid for his treatment.
You paid for me to stay at Lynham Abbey, not Mum?
I had the means, and Ellen felt...
Great. Terrific. I thought it was Miss Havisham, but it was you. Big Magwitch.
Magwitch actually helps Pip to fulfill his dreams.
I know my Dickens, Andrew. Don't you dare try to out-Dickens me, or it will be the worst of times. That's Dickens. I'm being clever.
I genuinely just wanted to help you.
By gaslighting me into thinking I'm ill, then paying to put me in a facility so you can gaslight everyone else into thinking I'm ill.
Stephen, I admit it. In the past, I've dissembled and played with the truth, but I've changed, truly. All I want to do now is help people.
Go yourself. You can't get into my head anymore, Andrew.
I don't want to get into your head.
Oh, yes, you do, but you can't, because I've changed the locks. I still know you. I see you. I'm looking at you right now.
I know you are.
Exactly. I'm staring directly at you.
I'm aware of that.
For my first question, I asked David if he's exhausted by playing, as he once said, unsympathetic, intelligent losers. His answer was an unequivocal no. He said he has no sympathy for actors who don't like to be typecast.
Just take the type out of it. It means you don't like to be cast. Take what's going. Take the opportunity to show off for money that fate is giving you And also, I don't like challenges. I like to feel like I know what I'm doing. I know what faces I'm pulling. This is the way of milking a little bit of sort of wry amusement out of this miserable scenario.
I feel like for a lot of actors, David, there's a moment when they go to maybe their fourth or fifth audition. And, you know, for like screen work, I think this stage probably a little different, but for screen work, and you like look around the room and you see the same 3 or 4 other people that you see from other auditions, and you're like, oh, this is the kind of guy I am.
Well, I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. I'm someone who never gets a job from an audition. What I do is I get to know talented writers, and my relentless nasal moaning gets into their heads and they end up typing it, and then they, with me in mind. And the thing about me as an actor is I'm more like me than anyone else on earth. I think so far. If someone crops up,
you are a leading world expert at being you, actually.
Exactly. So if that's what they want, I will get the part, even on a bad day.
Robert, your character is an almost, or maybe, I guess we'll call it a maybe sociopath. Maybe a probably sociopath.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about me either, that I just slipped seamlessly into that. I mean, sometimes I think we haven't really, I think we thought it was quite important not to decide whether he was just this very harmfully needy person who went round, you know, needing everyone's approval and caused a lot of trouble because of that, or whether he's just insane or the devil. And I certainly haven't decided. I mean, in the first series, sometimes we would do 2 takes where I would do something, you know, kind of reasonable, and you think, okay, maybe he's just this guy, he just wants people to love him, and then I do another one that was more pushing down on the gas of being a maniac, which of course is a lot more fun.
Here in the United States, double acts are somewhere between just barely a thing and not a thing. And in the UK, there is a very long tradition, you know, not just on screen where you guys have done most of your work, but on stage. You know, you can go to a comedy club or a comedy show, and, you know, one of the 5 acts or one of the 6 acts might be a double act, which, you know, hasn't been in the case in the States since the 50s and 60s. When you were young people, did you like double acts?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we both liked I don't know if you've heard of Morecambe and Wise, who were a sort of, they were this terrific, quite traditional sort of end of the pier sort of variety double act, and they were on TV in the 70s and 80s when we were growing up. And then the slightly more modern, there was Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry. And we watched I think we both watched their, we didn't grow up in the same house, but we've pieced this together, you know, retrospectively. We've found out what we were doing when we were little. Yeah, I think we both loved Fry and Laurie. So yes, there were people around that we both liked, but I don't think either of us had the intention of, you know, being in a double act. It wasn't like I want to find my comedy husband out there. I think if we'd met 2 other people that we thought were funny and made each other laugh and wanted to write and perform with, we'd have been in a triple act or group or troupe. But as it was just David and me that seemed like the most efficient comedy unit.
There were so many double acts on British TV. There was Morecambe and Wise and Fry and Laurie of different eras, but also there were the 2 Ronnies, Smith and Jones. It was absolutely the standard unit, particularly of sketch comedy on British TV. Obviously, there's the Monty Python group, and but that was very much the exception. In general, there were these double acts, and so I think, yeah, without thinking about it, we just thought, well, that's an obvious thing to have a go at, and you know, if you're thinking in terms of sketches on TV, which was the form of comedy that certainly I think we both thought of first as a thing to have a go at, you need 2 people talking to each other. And so I think if you're not thinking, a lot of people go into comedy because they imagine being stand-ups and going up to a microphone and trying to make an audience laugh. But for us more obvious was, okay, it's a scene, it's a shop or something, and so you need two people talking to each other.
Was that always your act? I mean, before you were working on screen, when you were whatever it was, doing shows on the stage in the dining hall in university, were you doing scenes on stage, or were you doing one guy's the smart guy, one guy's the dumb guy? By the way, I love one guy is the smart guy, one guy's the dumb guy. That sounded snide. That's like one of my favorite things ever.
Well, the funny thing is, by the time we got a sketch show on TV, we had already played Mark and Jez in Peep Show, and we had a sort of running behind the scenes kind of thing where we would sort of play versions of ourselves, and we kind of slipped into Mark and Jeremy there. That seemed like the most obvious way to write those things, where I was the dumb guy, and that was very enjoyable, and David was the uptight guy. I'm not see how I even now won't allow David to be the smart guy. David was the uptight guy, and I was the less uptight guy.
To be fair, he's also the snooty guy.
To give him his due. But when we started, we would write whole shows. We would like put on hour-long two-man shows where we would have this wild plot involving supervillains and spies and rent boys and all kinds of stuff, and we would play all the characters. So we would always be on stage playing a pair of characters, and then there would be lots of quick changes as one person went off and changed, and there would be jokes about the fact that there aren't enough actors to play all these characters, and we were doing that when we did that at university and in rooms above pubs, after we left as well.
I feel like Rooms Above Pubs is having a few times done sketch comedy in clubby environments rather than theatery environments. It is real tough to put over in that room, because a stand-up can always address the crowd. Like when there's another thing going on, like people are getting drinks or whatever, if you need to get focus back to the stage, you can always do it by directly engaging the audience. But when you're doing characters, you're doing sketches, it's a lot harder to do that. You just have to kind of power through.
Yes, I think there's definitely a problem. If the audience can see each other as clearly as they can see you, they will start to wonder whether the conversation you're having on the tiny stage that's a foot higher than everywhere else isn't necessarily more significant than a conversation they might be having with each other. And yes, you totally destroy this supposed, we're having a pizza in hell or whatever brilliant idea it is ruined if you have to turn to the people and go, can you shut up, please? No, I'm not a...
The funny thing is that when you, if you're doing a scene, like a play type, fourth wall type thing, if you break out of that because you have to address the audience, they find that disproportionately impressive than if you were a stand-up just working on their wits all the time. It's like if you're sticking to the script and then you break out for a second, they go, oh my God, they are alive. They're not just acting robots. And they're really impressed. So it's a superpower to be used very sparingly.
One of the challenges I remember most vividly from doing sketch in a stand-up club was you get on stage, and when you're sound checking, you realize you have to figure out whether you're going to walk around holding the microphones or just have the mics in stands and just make it so that in the scene, your character doesn't move very far from the microphones. Like, which one is worse for the suspension of disbelief?
Acting with handheld microphones, I think I'd erased that from my memory, but yes, that definitely happened at least twice. that was really bad.
You learn real quick that the wireless lavalier microphone is not a technology to be relied upon. You can bring them if you want, but it's not gonna. The sound guy's just gonna look at you and go like, "Well, we got mics on stage." What did each of you notice about the other when you were, in your late teens or 20 years old or whatever, when you met, that made you think like, oh, I kind of want to stick with this guy?
Well, I think we thought each other was funny. I think we were doing.
That was the clincher.
We met auditioning for a show at university, a pantomime, a sort of comedy version of Cinderella. We were auditioning for, and in the audition, we both got into the show. But in the auditions, I thought Rob was, really funny, and I didn't expect him to be as funny as he was because he looked quite cool. He had that long hair and an earring, which I took to be cool. And I thought, oh, goodness me, and yet funny, cool and funny.
I blew his mind.
I know. And I still, I'm cool and funny is not something I've managed, some would say either of. But so and we were in this exciting student theatre environment and looking to do comedy and believe that we could do it as a job. And so I think we sort of spotted each other and thought, well, let's try and write some words just for the two of us to say to each other. I mean, in a show, not in a romantic sense. That sounds like scripting a date.
Not like a Cyrano de Bergerac situation.
No.
Not yet. No, we wrote, the first sketch we wrote was not very good, but we had a hell of a good time doing it. We were really making each other laugh, even if no theoretical audience was ever going to laugh at that particular sketch. And we just got along like that. And then it turned out that wasn't a fluke. And we did write some good sketches. And also on stage, you couldn't help noticing that there was a sort of, not telepathy or anything like that, but there was whatever that thing is. People use the word chemistry, they probably overuse it, but I always sort of knew what David was going to do or was doing without necessarily looking at him, and it wasn't always the predictable thing. In fact, I'm not saying I always knew what David was going to do. It'd be that usual thing that he does, but there was a sort of some sort of complicity going on, and that was I sort of thought that was probably valuable and rare and a good thing.
Do you remember what the first thing you wrote together was?
Oh,
yes. It was called War Farce, and it was a sort of the idea was that somebody had written a bad thing, which was a farce set in the World War I trenches, and that they were trying to make the First World War sort of funny in a kind of, ooh, Vicar, my trousers have just fallen down kind of way with songs. And I think we tried to write a song as well, did we?
Yes. I think it was basically, we said, let's take the genre of the West End farce, which was not a genre we knew at all.
Anything about.
Yeah, that's a trouble. When the thing you're parodying is something you're almost entirely ignorant of, that's a bad starting point. Because we might have
you had both served in the First World War.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When it came to the reality of the trenches, we were, let's say, considerably better informed than we were about the tradition of farceurs in the West End. But I think the key problem is revealed by the fact that we put a song in, because anyone who's seen even one of the famous Whitehall farces of the 1970s would have told us that they don't have songs. It'd be like saying, oh, here's our parody of a Western. Look how everyone's on bicycles.
Yeah. There was also the fact that neither of us could play an instrument. Neither of us at the time thought that we were particularly strong singers. And I don't know what on earth, and we had no musical I don't know what on earth we thought we were doing. But anyway, we had a good time going, it's all in a day's war. That's what the war's for, or whatever it was.
Did you record the melody into a tape recorder? What was the composition process of a song for two non-singer, non-instrument players?
We didn't. We've never done it before or since.
I don't think there was a tune. I think the idea, we thought someone would provide a tune, further down the line. So it was sort of like just some rhyming couplets where we rhymed the word war and the word for brilliantly. I'm sure you'll agree.
That's the only memorable bit. Yeah. That's as good as it got.
Was there something that went really well for the two of you that made you think, oh, wow, this could be a real thing?
Yes, I think, we did after a few weeks after we'd first written a couple of sketches together, we decided to write a show to put on at university, and which we did. And this was the first of our pairs of characters, crazy adventure thing. And we wrote.
It was called Innocent Millions Dead or Dying, a wry look at the post-apocalyptic age, brackets, with songs, which just goes to show we carried on, we persevered with this songwriting thing. And that show had at least 2 songs.
Yeah.
And David couldn't remember the words to one of them for the first 3 performances.
And the thing is, we wrote the show, but we didn't rehearse it. And it was, on the first night, we were really frightened because we'd sold quite a few tickets. And so we thought our dream of using the first night as a sort of rehearsal was collapsing. And so we couldn't really remember much of the script we'd written. But nevertheless, it went very well admittedly in front of probably largely drunken students, but they really laughed and it was great fun. And it was so we did sort of think, oh, we're onto something here. In fact, I remember worrying that it wouldn't go so well when we did learn the script. But we learned the script and it also went down well. But it was a bad lesson in a way, because it was a sign that you can get away with it with zero preparation, which you can't often. But it was also a sign that there was something. There was, the chemistry thing that cliche was sort of evident to us.
We'll finish up with David Mitchell and Robert Webb after the break. Stay with us. It's Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR.
Whether you're looking to discover a new series to binge, find your next great read, or check out that movie everyone's talking about, NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast is your guide to all things entertainment. Every weekday, we keep pop culture in high spirits. Listen now to the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast from NPR.
Bria, what's your reader wheelhouse?
A woman on a journey, space, post-apocalyptic roads, and magical food. Mallory, what's your reader wheelhouse?
Werewolves, haunted houses, weird fiction, and books set in Florida for some reason.
We're Reading Glasses, and we want to know what your reader wheelhouse is.
We can use it to help you find more books that you love.
And avoid books that you don't. So whatever you like to read about and however you like to read it,
we want to help you read better.
Reading Glasses, every Thursday on Maximum Fun.
Welcome back to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guests are David Mitchell and Robert Webb. For almost 30 years now, the two have performed as the comedy duo Mitchell and Webb. They've starred in shows like the Mitchell and Webb Look, Peep Show, and Back, which is just entering its 2nd season on IFC. Well, let's play a little bit of Peep Show, which was the wonderful and so funny television show in which the two of you starred for something like 10, 12 years, 9 seasons over quite a number of years. You were a duo of roommates on the show, and Mark, who was played by David Mitchell, is a socially awkward loan manager with a cynical outlook on life. Another intelligent but unlikable schlub.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, who's played by my guest Robert Webb, is a slacker and a musician without talent. The show also starred Olivia Colman and was co-written and created by Jesse Armstrong. So in this clip, Jeremy's band just got their first paid gig ever, and he is celebrating at a restaurant with Mark.
Sorry, excuse me. I ordered 3 pilau rice and 3 peshwari naans.
It's all right, Jeremy. It's all right. I changed the order. There's always rice left.
It's not all right. Bring us 3 pilau rice and 4 peshwari naans, please. I've shared enough rice with you, Mark. I'm in the big league now.
4 naan, Jeremy. 4? That's insane.
So, one of the things about this show is that the characters are abrasive at best. And I have a friend who really loves the show, as do I, and is a writer for a very successful network television sitcom here in the United States, and a good one too. And he asked me to ask you something along the lines of, my entire life is having executives write notes to me that say, could we make the characters more likable? And or could they be nicer, or could they be warmer? The group of you writing these shows and working on these characters really leaned into making them unpleasant over a really long period of time. Was there ever a point when you thought this moderately successful sitcom could be a really successful sitcom if we just had somebody save a cat from a tree?
If I may say it, dreaming of something moderately successful becoming something very successful is very new world. That's not it's not what we do in Europe. If it's moderately successful, you go, well, I'll take that. I thought it would be a disaster.
We thought everyone would die.
Yeah, moderately successful, brilliant. Don't mess with moderately successful. It goes to crap. So I think that's the first thing. But there is less pressure, I would say, that there is a tradition of nastiness in British, well, every part of British life. We're a horrible, horrible country, but there's a tradition of nastiness in British comedy. It is there's a deep suspicion of attempts to make characters more likable, and probably to too great an extent. I think we underrate the comic and dramatic power of characters being lovable, and because we love watching American shows where that happens. I love Homer Simpson, even though he doesn't exist, and I definitely am fonder of that show than if he was just sort of relentlessly dysfunctional in a way that wasn't likable. But I think we sort of feel the authenticity. If it's comedically authentic, it must be really bitterly nasty, is our sort of knee-jerk thing. So it's harder for the execs over here to say make it more likable, because they know that's going against comic orthodoxy, or British comic orthodoxy. So I think there's less pressure on that, and we've got a lot of shows here, like the classic Fawlty Towers, which is a brilliant 6 hours of comedy set in a hotel, and very much have got a mainstream audience. And the central character of that is deeply, deeply unpleasant and unlikable, and yet people sort of warm to him and sort of root for him in a weird way. So there's a bit of that, a bit of precedent for those characters working in shows that get mainstream appeal.
And in terms of success, there was also less pressure from that point of view as well, because the reviews were always good. The audiences weren't massive, but they were very loyal. They were always there, and it was a late night show on Channel 4, which is not one of the sort of it's one of the main channels, but it's not enormous, and we were sort of allowed to kind of plod along in that way, and we knew that the scripts were very funny. So as long as the scripts carried on being really funny and the show was really funny, we weren't given that much cause to worry about a massive audience. We were sort of allowed to, in a very, maybe it is quite British, I just said plod along in our usual, we were allowed to plod along, and that's what we wanted to do.
So part of the conceit of the show is that it is essentially a first person show. It is from the like literal camera point of view of the characters, but it also has voiceover narration from the inside of the characters. The thoughts are made audible to the audience. How is it different to? I mean, I'm sure that whole thing started feeling like a trap around the 8th episode that was written, but like, how is it different to look at making comedy from the first person rather than from the third person?
I think definitely in terms of the sheer practicalities of shooting something entirely in POV shots, that there was not a day where we didn't think, well, we know why that isn't how things are normally made. And I think we know that in a deep way that perhaps no one else in the world knows, because it's just so impractical and difficult, and the lighting, and it takes forever. So I think we did a lot think, why can't we just shoot this scene normally? And it's just, and then you get to interact with the person you're acting with rather than sort of, guess how they're going to play it. But
and I mean, part of you, when you say that everything was shot in point of view, not only was that literally the case, but I think for a fair amount of the material, it was cameras like physically attached to, like literally from the point of view, like cameras on hats and shoulders.
Yeah.
Like I know that at some point it developed into, well, we once in a while we can shoot over somebody's shoulder and say that's the point of view. But like there were like cameras on hats.
There were cameras on hats. Yeah.
For the first series, yeah, there was a little micro camera mounted on a bicycle helmet. And so, yeah, we were doing it like that, and you sort of ducked down so that the helmet was at eye level rather than at forehead level, and it was just bizarre. And then we realized that actually the quality of the video that we were getting from that was so poor that they were degrading the video when they shot it with a proper camera so that it could look equally rubbish. And then at that point they realized, let's not have the. But at one point there was a driving scene where Jeremy is driving around Croydon, and and I'm the one of the two of us. Well, that's why Jeremy was driving. Mark wasn't, because Mark can't drive. Neither can David. Anyway, so I was driving and also filming David with my forehead cam. And this wasn't on a low loader or anything. I was actually driving in traffic, and then you would do this like 30-minute take going round and round and round. And then, or at least you go round and round and round for half an hour and get 4 takes or whatever. And then they'd review that because they couldn't watch live because the technology was, it just wasn't there. And then they go, the problem is you don't seem to be filming David properly. You're not really moving your head right over to the side and getting, well, can we think why that might be? It might be because I'm trying to concentrate on not crashing the car. So, in the early days we were doing, and it was much more difficult than, in the first few series anyway, because of cables. It wasn't until I think series 5, 6, 7 that the camera didn't have to have a cable coming out of the back. So not only were they trying to hide all the lights because you've got this POV camera swinging around 180 degrees, they also had to hide all the cables, and it was just a nightmare. We got through directors of photography. I don't think anybody came back for the first 4 or 5 series. We got through them. There was quite a high turnover because they all just had a breakdown trying to shoot that show.
I mean, it's not like you guys invented dramatic irony or anything, but it does seem to me like a particular kind of humor for the audience to be seeing the world from the character's perspective while also knowing the world from outside of the character's perspective.
That's absolutely right. And the other side of the premise that I think we didn't ever tire of and was tremendously useful to the show, and is one of the reasons why it's why the episodes are so sort of tightly packed with jokes, and is that hearing the thoughts, that is hugely comedically and dramatically useful, because you can drop a scene if it wasn't really funny and just sort of fill the audience in with the thoughts of the person going into the next scene, and you can add jokes, and for me that's the side of the premise of it that's hugely sort of useful, and every program I make, that does, you sort of think, you can't just totally cut things in the same way. You have to tell the story through action, which you actually don't in Peep Show. You can cut action if it's not funny.
And I think that contributes to it being such a rude show, because people obviously are thinking things that they would never say, apart from Jeremy, obviously. When we would go in and record those voiceovers, David would have like 3 pages and I would have like half a page, because the difference is Jeremy does say everything that he thinks. And so he had comparatively few unvoiced thoughts, whereas Mark did actually have a filter. So yeah, he was always doing that.
I mentioned that Olivia Colman was also one of the stars of the show. You've worked with her in many things. I mean, she had a very long and fruitful comedy career before she became a super famous and super internationally famous actor. Did you like look at her being a weirdo on a sitcom and think, it's in this person's future, international stardom?
We weren't that surprised. I'll go that far, because from as soon as we met her, actually, she was one of the funniest people we knew, and also one of the best dramatic actors as well. When she was, in shows when we were students, so it didn't come as that much of a surprise. And actually, given the provocation of her winning of a direct contemporary winning an Oscar, I don't feel that much bitterness or hate. Actually, in fact, I'm still waiting for the internal backlash where I start writing, spiteful letters to her. I haven't. That hasn't happened yet. I'm only delighted that it's gone so brilliantly.
I'm jealous of my friend's WGA award, and I'm not even a television writer.
No, I mean, the thing that show, the Pantomime of Cinderella, that Rob and I met during the auditions of, was also the show we met Olivia Colman on. This stage show at university, and I mean, I remember it about being in a scene with Rob and Olivia, and thinking, having previously done a play at school, thinking, blimey, this university drama these people are good. Which was an entirely false impression, because I didn't realize that I was on stage with, by someone I was going to collaborate with for decades, and is a brilliant comedian and a future Oscar winner. But because actually a lot of university drama is really terrible. But at that, I'm just in this pantomime, we're just turning into Pantomime of Cinderella, and these guys are brilliant. So I think we both thought that she was absolutely as talented as it's possible to be from the start. I nevertheless was surprised she won an Oscar, because in my experience, there's no justice in the world. So the fact that she deserves one doesn't mean she'd get one, but she does deserve one, and she's got one. So that's nice.
And actually winning, from a performance that contains humor, which is quite rare, isn't it? Because anything, you get this in movies, and also I think in literature, that if something is capable of making you laugh, it is quite often despised, because we can all make each other laugh, and you kind of go, well, that's not difficult. The Ted down the pub is funny, so no one's giving
everyone likes a bit of silliness, but let's break out the endless misery and then give each other some awards.
Yeah, for being who can be most solemn.
Robert, one of the reasons that the second season of Back came a few years after the first was that you had a pretty major health crisis.
Yeah.
How did you find out that you had a heart condition?
At the Cast Medical, where you so you turn up and the doctor, it's usually a very routine kind of perfunctory thing for the insurance, basically. And he put his stethoscope on my heart and pulled a very alarming face. And then you'd think they go to, medical school, they'd teach them, it'd be the first week would be, how to keep a straight face when you hear something deeply alarming in some. Anyway, he didn't do that.
In fact, the opposite.
He really went
for them face pulling.
He really went for it. It was like a gurning competition.
Yeah. Particularly if it's a heart condition, you'd think that's the last thing you want to do is to make someone jump.
Yeah. It really did give me quite a shock, which is not what you want. Anyway, it turned out he said, what have you been doing about the heart murmur? And I said, what heart murmur? And then it turned out after a few scans that I had my mitral valve, which is one of the valves in your heart, had prolapsed, and it wasn't doing its job. It was just flapping around uselessly. And the heart had grown and remodeled and was doing all kinds of weird things to keep the show on the road. And I was given, a cardiologist said, you're not going to have a heart attack in the next fortnight, but if we don't do something about this, in the next 2, 4, or 6 months, this heart will fail. And I went, oh, okay then. So I had to have heart surgery. So after that consultation, I went in, which was the day before we were supposed to start filming. And then I went and did, 8 or 9 days of filming. And then I thought, actually, this is a bad idea. I should probably go home and rest before the operation. And then, about a week after that, I had the operation, and then it took me 4 months to recover. And then we filmed the rest of, we started filming the rest of the show, and then we had to stand down for COVID. So there was another few months, and then finally we finished it. But that's why, that first delay was because I was tremendously poorly, but I'm very well now. Thank you.
What led you to not address or disregard the symptoms that must have come?
Well, there weren't that many. I mean, I was feeling tired, but I just kind of put that down to being 47. And also, I was drinking a fair bit, and I still smoked like an idiot. So I was just leading a very unhealthy lifestyle. And I did get the odd chest pain, but it wasn't terribly dramatic. I just didn't know that was that was going on. So if I was very grateful that that got spotted at the medical.
I gather that you've been sober since.
Yeah. I mean, they're not really. I had it's a weird thing because you mentioned these two things at the same time, and people quite naturally make the connection. The mitral valve failure is not doesn't happen because of lifestyle. It's a congenital thing. It's a birth defect. That I had two cardiologists and a surgeon tell me that, and I chose to believe them. In fact, I was very relieved to hear that. But at the same time, when I came out of hospital, I had a newfound respect for my internal organs, and I wanted to be on my own side, as it were. And I'm a SWAT really at heart, and I wanted to be top patient. I wanted to impress the doctors and have a phenomenal recovery. I didn't just want an okay recovery. I wanted an amazing recovery, so they're all very pleased with me. So I don't drink anymore, and I certainly don't smoke, obviously, and I do proper exercise and all that stuff.
Did it change other parts of your life? I mean, that's a big change.
Yes, huge change. Because I think since school really, and where I was feeling quite rebellious about PE, physical education, and games, and I was so bad at football, and I think I came out of school with this anti-exercise kind of feeling, and kind of, oh no, we're the people who read books and do acting on stage. We don't do exercise. That's for other people. And it was an idiotic attitude. And I just kind of, apart from dancing, I always liked dancing, but apart from that, I didn't really live in my body until I started exercising as I recovered from the operation. And now I go for a run 3 or 4 times a week and really enjoy it. But so that's one of the bigger changes.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. I'm talking with the British comedy duo David Mitchell and Robert Webb. At this point, I want to give you a heads up. There's going to be a pretty abrupt tone shift in this interview. You'll hear me ask Robert Webb about some Twitter posts he wrote criticizing a British charity called Mermaids, which supports transgender, non-binary, and gender-diverse children. Mermaids has been targeted by people and groups who oppose gender-affirming medical care for trans children in the UK. Things got a little tense in the conversation. We're presenting the next segment basically as it happened, so you might hear some awkward silences. Also, if those issues are something to which you are sensitive, we thought you should know in advance. Okay, let's get back into it. I want to ask you about something a little intense, right up there with having gone through heart treatment. So a couple of years ago, Robert, you tweeted about a piece in the Times of London that was very critical of an organization called Mermaids, which is an organization that does education and advocacy and aid around trans kids. And you were pretty pointed in your retweet of that article as well. And at the time, Mermaids was kind of like being targeted and ended up having a big government grant it received reconsidered. It was ultimately upheld, but went into like review. So you were asked about it. So the tweet was deleted. You were asked about it relatively recently. You were asked whether you regretted the tweet by the Times of London. And you said, not really. On the other hand, I started to say something, then I stopped. And that means everyone can rush in to fill the blanks. He's a transphobe. He's a once you say, I'm not transphobic, but it's a disaster, it just seems unlucky that you can't acknowledge that there are going to be competing interests here and there without that becoming you're a bigot. I guess, given that you said you don't regret the tweet, does it still like reflect how you feel about mermaids or organizations like
No, I mean,
Mermaids?
Janice Turner wrote this column. I can't even really remember what her specific objections were, but they made sense to me at the time, and I retweeted it approvingly. And then it was there was this feeling that if you criticize a charity, that is, or the way a charity operates or its methodology, that is the same thing as criticizing the client base. It's like saying if I've got a problem with the way Oxfam has been operating, it's because I hate poor people in the third world, and it's kind of like it started to feel like if you criticize Brexit, it's because you hate Britain, or if you criticize Jeremy Corbyn, it's because you hate poor people. It was just a really weird way of looking at it, and the whole debate is really overheated, and it's impossible to really talk about this or say anything even remotely reasonable without what I say being used as a vehicle for another round of defamation and abuse, really. So it's not a topic I tend to dive into anymore at all, really.
It's kind of scary for me because I have 2 gender nonconforming kids, one of whom is transgender. And I know that when my oldest kid came out to me when she was in kindergarten, I was really reliant on an organization called Gender Spectrum that does many of the same things that Mermaids does. And, so many people don't understand what the best practices are for caring for trans kids. And, the kinds of criticisms, I think people react in an overheated way because, there are a lot of trans people who weren't supported when they were kids, I know that you had talked about talking to them, to the folks at Mermaids when all this happened. Did that ever end up happening?
No, it didn't. No, because it just wasn't a conversation that I wanted to carry on getting into because the reaction was so strong. It was as if I'd said, I hate trans children, which of course I don't. Do I have to say, okay, maybe I do. That is not how I feel about the situation. It was critical of the way that Mermaids was conducting itself.
Do you mean specifically the way
I can't remember, Jesse, really.
The organization? Yeah. How do you feel?
It was the end of 2018, and it's not something that I really want to talk about.
Do you feel like it's appropriate to affirm kids' gender identities?
Yeah, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, but I'm not really an expert. You're a parent and you've got first-hand experience.
Okay, I know it's a really tough thing to talk about and a thorny thicket to wade into, given how intense people's feelings are about it. So I appreciate you talking to me about it. Is there anything that has been left unsaid that you would like to say? Okay. Well, Robert and David. Robert, I'm sorry to end on such a tough note, but I didn't want to leave it. I didn't want to leave it loose. I enjoy and admire your work so much, both of you. So thank you for all of that, and thanks for the great new show, and thanks for talking to me.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
David Mitchell and Robert Webb, their show Back is airing now on IFC. The American Academy of Pediatrics and all other major doctors groups in the United States recommend care for gender nonconforming kids that affirms their stated gender identity. If there's a gender nonconforming child in your life, my family has received caring and invaluable guidance from the folks at Gender Spectrum. They provide resources and training around gender and kids, not only for families, but also teachers, doctors, mental health workers, and other professionals. You can find Gender Spectrum online at genderspectrum.org. Our company, Maximum Fun, has been proud to support the work of Trans Lifeline. If you are transgender or gender nonconforming and you need emotional support or are facing a crisis, you can find them online at translifeline.org, or you can call 877-565-8860. 877-565-8860. We'll have those links and more on our website, the Bullseye page at MaximumFun.org. That's the end of another episode of Bullseye. Bullseye is created out of the homes of me and the staff of Maximum Fun in and around greater Los Angeles, California, where this week the completely barren Charlie Brown Christmas tree-esque tree in my backyard burst to life like a caricature of spring. It's now entirely covered in green leaves, and it all happened within the course of a week. Nature is really something. The show is produced by Speaking Into Microphones. Our producer is Kevin Ferguson. Jesus Ambrosio and Jordan Cowling are our associate producers. We get help from Casey O'Brien. Production fellows at Maximum Fun are Richard Roby and Valerie Moffat. Special thanks this week to Jerry Holmes, Evan Urquhart, and Danielle Kurtzleben. Our thanks to all of them for lending us a hand. Our interstitial music is by Dan Wally, also known as DJ W. Our theme song is by The Go Team. Thanks very much to them and their label Memphis Industries for sharing it. You can also keep up with the show on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We post all our interviews there. And I think that's about it. Just remember, all great radio hosts have a signature sign-off.
Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.